Quick question. Would you rather be misunderstood for doing the right thing or praised for staying out of trouble? Now here's the catch. Either way, the world's gonna judge you, but only one choice lets you sleep at night. Which one? Well, that's something we'll be exploring today. Hello, children. Recently, I have been playing ZZZ and made a video about it. Long story short, I came out of curiosity, intrigued by the retro vibes, and stayed for the plot because it was just absolute cinema. And I thought that it couldn't get better than this. And it did. The latest epilogue chapter for this 1.6 patch felt like it was bioengineered for me as well as for Hugo, the character himself. And as promised, I'm going to yap about it, so lock in and get ready for a YAPMAXXING 5000 from me. Heads up, this video will contain spoilers on the latest chapter of this date, so please keep that in mind. Generally, ZZZ is known to take place in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity tries to rebuild among the chaos. I didn't know this was a debate for some of you, if it's post-apocalyptic or still in an apocalypse or post-apocalyptic, but I just regard it as post-apocalyptic because that is literally what the official Hoyoverse website said. So, if you think it's wrong, feel free to correct them. I am simply the messenger. Anyways, as new Eridu grew and attracted more resettled residents, it also led to the industrialization and monetization of ether from the Hollows. This, of course, led to increasing tension between monopolistic enterprises, gangs, conspirators, and fanatics, all trying to control the profits. Let me get straight to the point, especially regarding the recent chapter. The Mayflower family, who runs the new Eridu administration, is in the middle of a heated conflict likely threatened by the monopolistic enterprise union known as Tops and fanatics called Exaltists. So, the more the city grew, the wider the gap became between the wealthy elite and the struggling masses. And that's when Mockingbird, founded by Hugo and Lycaon, came into play. When I think of Mockingbird, a few things come to mind. The name itself brings to mind the idea of something both clever and persistent, a bird that mocks or mirrors its surroundings. In literature, the mockingbird is often symbolic of innocence and the idea of something being misunderstood, like in To Kill a Mockingbird. So, killing a mockingbird means destroying that innocence. And in the story, that innocence is ultimately crushed by the cruelty of an unjust system. And we might come back to this later. But essentially, Mockingbird feels like a group that's challenging the status quo, fighting against a corrupt system. It has a rebellious edge, like it's mocking the powers that be by turning their own rules and inequalities back against them. And that is why they are infamously known for their unconventional ways to serve justice.
We all know there isn't anything in this world that's fair. A prime example being the uneven distribution of wealth. People from Tops splurge on luxurious collectibles, while the poor have to gamble with their own lives just to get by. Of course, besides wealth, there's also an unequal distribution in this world of happiness and suffering, hope and despair, love and hate. It's all just so unfair. Somebody has to do something to tilt the balance of the scales. And thus Mockingbird was born. We take from those who have far more than they deserve and give it to those who deserve to have more. If you ask me, that's enough to be considered a form of justice.
To truly understand the motive behind Mockingbird, let's go back to where it all began. Hugo came from a powerful family, but was always at odds with them, particularly his father. Constantly feeling suffocated, he eventually ran away from home. That's when he met Lycaon and their master, Jack. Jack became more than just a mentor to Hugo and Lycaon as phantom thieves. He was like a father figure. The trio's vision was simple: to change the world, to fight for justice in their own way, even if they had to resort to unconventional methods. But even so, Jack reminded them with a very important lesson.
But there's something more important I would like to teach you. Something about faith. I may not walk the path of justice, but I do not walk the path of evil. There's too much injustice in this world. And there are times when it becomes necessary to right those wrongs with unconventional methods. Taking lives, however, is out of the question. Life is a precious gift, one that nobody has the right to steal. No one should have the authority to judge whether another lives or dies. Keep that in mind.
Jack's lesson on faith wasn't about religious belief, but rather a deeper conviction, belief in themselves, belief in their ability to change the world. He knew that especially for Hugo, a boy with a past full of suffering and abandonment, whose own struggles with darkness, and Lycaon, who never had much experience with family bonding, as they walk through dangerous paths, faith was the foundation they needed from going astray. And such faith wasn't just about hoping for the best, it was about believing in their mission without losing themselves in the process, staying true to their values, even if the world they were trying to change didn't make it easy. It was about trusting each other, holding on to their humanity while challenging an unjust system. After Jack's passing, his teachings remained a constant guide. They carried his words with them, and it became the foundation of Mockingbird. And it also forged an unbreakable bond between Hugo and Lycaon, an oath to never pass judgment and take a human life.
Well then, today's the day that Mockingbird will officially start flying.
But unfortunately, the triumphs they had earned were overshadowed by a broken oath and the sting of betrayal between the both of them. But how did this happen? Well, firstly, it wouldn't be much of a deep dive if I simply told you the answer directly. And for those already familiar with the story, it'd feel a bit redundant to just repeat what the game already explains. To truly understand what led to this tragic turn, we need to dive into the perspectives and beliefs of each character. Keep in mind, this isn't a full character deep dive like I usually do, or this video will be an hour long. Instead, we'll focus on what built into the character's current beliefs and actions. We don't really know much about Hugo for now, but we do know that he is the illegitimate child of the heir of Ravenlock family, and was bought off from his mother at a very young age. He was always treated as an outsider by his half-siblings. His father was no better, as he was more concerned with maintaining the family's legacy. This is probably why the family dynamic is very, very strange. The children were treated more like subjects than family. Every month, they were assessed and ranked to determine who would become the true heir of the Ravenlock family. Despite being treated poorly by everyone, Hugo did have one sibling who genuinely cared for him until one day when he killed her himself.
Hugo, well done. My children, how many times have I told you before? In this world, only the most ruthless, cruel, and unscrupulous of people ever make it to the top. Like Hugo here, who was willing to murder his only true loved one without a second thought. Only someone with the means and the gumption to do that is qualified to be my heir.
But I...
It's all over now, and the results are obvious. The winner of this month's assessment is Hugo.
It's still unclear what led to the murdering of Hugo's half-sister. Regardless, this scene of his father praising for such a heinous act rather than punishing him sums up the kind of upbringing he had, one that was cold, brutal, and emotionally distant. Family bonds felt like a curse to him. What mattered was ruthlessness, the ability to act without hesitation or remorse. This kind of thinking had a huge impact on Hugo's development. From a young age, he was taught that survival and dominance came at the expense of human connection. Loyalty and love were seen as weakness, while manipulation and sacrifice were necessary tools for climbing to the top. For Hugo, this lesson was ingrained deeply into his psyche. He learned that the world was fundamentally unjust, and the only way to survive was by embracing the harshness of it all.
You don't seem convinced, Hugo.
As you mentioned, this world is unjust. That's why we must strive to bring fairness to this world. Those who cause harm should face consequences, just as those who take lives should. But not all lives hold the same value. Sometimes, you may need to eliminate one if it means saving more.
Even in the very beginning, he had always been skeptical of Jack's teachings on faith. Faith to him is nothing more than a comforting lie people tell themselves to avoid making the hard choices. Hugo's past had shown him the cruelty of the world, which is why he's so proud and boastful in his beliefs. He feels he's the only one who understands how the world works and that his actions, however extreme, are justified by the greater good he aims to achieve. Thus, he's always prepared to take the necessary steps others are too weak to take, including breaking his oath and seeking revenge against those who wronged him. Because for him, the oath he and Lycaon swore, never to take a life, was an idealistic fantasy, one that ignored the cruel reality of their world. The oath was never a vow to uphold, but a restraint that kept them from doing what needed to be done.
My father, the man I hated, stood right before me. I could have ended his life easily, but I hesitated. I remembered that damned oath and their repeated attempts to convince me. I didn't do it. Because of that, innocent people died. All because of him. If I'd killed him first, then none of those tragedies would have happened. People like him don't deserve to live.
So when the time came, when he finally stood face to face with the ones who had taken everything from him, he did not hesitate, even if it meant manipulating his companions. For Lycaon, he may see it as an act of vengeance, but to Hugo, it was justice, one that could only be achieved by crossing the very line they had once sworn never to cross. It's time to move on to Lycaon, the leader and representative of Victoria Housekeeping Co., basically running the show and managing the whole crew. Yes, he's giving butler, and he's sort of a clean freak. I just wanted to put it out there. Or perhaps foreshadowing. But on a serious note, he puts on a front elegance and composure, embodying the ideal of a reliable leader who can handle any challenge. Lycaon's loyalty is one of his defining traits, something that he carries with him in every role he serves. He's not just someone who follows orders, but someone who invests himself deeply in fulfilling the needs of his master. Taking example from his agent's story, Lycaon faced a dilemma on whether to keep Lilac, a daughter of his current master of that time, safe from a Walmart version of Mockingbird who tried to manipulate her or to fulfill her wishes to meet them so she could be a part of the group. However, Lycaon managed to resolve this tension by truly understanding Lilac's needs. Deeply, he understood that it isn't just about Lilac wanting to join the Mockingbird, but rather her deeper longing for validation, acceptance, and a sense of importance. Lycaon, understanding this desire, didn't simply stop her from acting impulsively. Instead, he fulfilled her wish to meet the Mockingbird while keeping her safe and addressing her true desire by teaching her that true validation doesn't come from external approval, but recognizing her own self-worth. Rather than simply denying her request or letting her make a mistake, he finds a way to guide her toward a healthier realization, balancing both duty and compassion. Ultimately, Lycaon's deep-rooted loyalty and perceptive nature shape the way he internalized Jack's teachings. His approach to justice is likely nuanced rather than rigidly idealistic, valuing understanding over punishment. If the world is unjust, then justice, in his eyes, should not be about revenge or retribution, but about balance. Jack's philosophy that one must not walk the path of evil, even while fighting injustice, resonated with Lycaon, aligning with his belief in justice as something that requires wisdom, restraint, and empathy. Thus, this makes him more of a protector and guide, rather than a rigid enforcer. Deep down, Hugo and Lycaon's beliefs are shaped by what they hold above all else. For Lycaon, justice is rooted in trust and responsibility toward others, while for Hugo, it is an unyielding pursuit that must be achieved at any cost. And in the past, this difference was made clear in a single moment, one that lingers even now.
I shall never betray my loyalty to my companions.
It's loyalty to justice.
Regardless, beneath both Hugo and Lycaon's exterior lies a deeper complexity. For Lycaon, his obsession with cleanliness and composure is more than just a quirk. It is an extension of his need for control. It is not merely about tidiness, but about maintaining a world where order prevails, where mistakes can be corrected. He holds himself with restraint, measured and deliberate, because to lose that control would mean allowing disorder to seep in. Not just around him, but within himself. And yet for all his restraint, there is a part of him that wrestles with the weight of his convictions. Justice may demand wisdom, but what happens when wisdom alone is not enough? If we look deeper, his ideal of never taking a life was never truly his own, more of a way to prove his loyalty to Jack and not a principle forged from within. And when faced with the harsh reality of what that oath demands, he begins to see its fragility.
I do not mean to pass judgment on him and his decision, but I refuse to accept a partner who is willing to trample over other people's lives for their own desires.
This was the doubt Jack had once warned him about, that Hugo, for all his ideals, carried a darkness that could one day consume him.
But he has inherited the seed of evil. You cannot let it take root. So then, Lycaon, promise me now. You must hold his chain tight, to restrain him, to stop him, and when necessary, to choke him.
It's an unsettling contrast. If Jack truly believed in faith, why did he plant the seed of doubt? And if he swore never to take a life, why was he willing to make an exception for Hugo? To resolve the contradiction, Lycaon believed that the only way to keep his hands clean was to stop Hugo from breaking the oath first. By keeping an eye on him, he thought their loyalty to each other and Jack's will would stay firm. But Hugo had always known better. He had always sensed that beneath Lycaon's measured words and steady presence, there was doubt. That no matter how much Lycaon stood beside him, there was a part of him that never truly believed Hugo could escape his past.
I know you've never fully trusted me, Lycaon, even before it all fell apart.
And when the moment came, the oath they swore shattered. It confirmed what Lycaon had tried so hard to suppress. If even Hugo could falter, then perhaps faith was not as unshakable as he once believed. He not only has failed to stop Hugo, but also Jack's promise. This is where his need for control turns inward. If he could not stop this from happening, if faith and loyalty were not enough, then perhaps the only thing left to control was himself. His composure, his methods, his sense of order. These were not just habits, but necessities. Because if he let disorder take hold, if he let his emotions dictate his actions, he risked unraveling completely. Thus, his obsession with cleanliness was never just about maintaining his surroundings. It was about erasing the things he could not accept, purging the chaos before it consumed him. After all, if you look at his younger self, you'd notice how rash he was compared to the more composed person he is now. And him being bothered when he can't control his canine instincts, like unconsciously wagging his tail when he's happy. Buddy, you might have some issues. And perhaps this is why his betrayal to leave Mockingbird, or rather, his loss of faith, cuts so deeply. It wasn't an impulsive decision, nor was it rooted in anger or resentment toward Hugo. It was the culmination of an internal war between his unwavering loyalty and the realization that sometimes, no matter how much you try to hold things together, they inevitably fall apart. That realization left a fracture in his sense of identity that he could not ignore. If faith and loyalty had failed him once, then instead of abandoning them, he clung to them even harder. Perhaps, in his mind, devotion became a form of atonement, a way to prove that loyalty could still mean something if only he upheld it with enough discipline. But the irony is that this isn't true loyalty for at least a part of it. It's a coping mechanism, a way to avoid the deeper conflict within himself. Because if he ever allows himself to question again, if he ever has to choose between loyalty and his own convictions, he might find himself right back in the same place, forced to let go of something he once held dear.
Enough! Can't trust anything you say anymore. I'm leaving Mockingbird, now! As your friend, I'll give you one last piece of advice. Please, stop here. Otherwise, the day will come where your hatred and ambition will consume you.
Meanwhile, despite appearing cynical or indifferent on the surface, Hugo always had faith in Lycaon and Mockingbird, even if he didn't fully realize it. If he truly didn't believe in them, he could have just walked away, find other people who are aligned with his beliefs. But instead, he stuck around, despite Lycaon's repeated mistakes throughout the missions. In fact, he was far more hopeful that they would eventually succeed together.
Where are you going?
Anywhere. Someone from the Mayflowers got in touch with me before.
Are you mad? You know what those hypocrites in city administration are like. They're no different from tops. We fought them together all this time, and now you're leaving to serve as their lapdog. Are you going to turn your back on Mockingbird? Turn your back on me?
The fact that Lycaon's departure from Mockingbird hit Hugo so hard shows that it wasn't just about losing a teammate. It was about betrayal on a deeper level. It unveils how Hugo knew he had broken their oath, but he still believed Lycaon would understand the reasoning behind it. But when Lycaon walked away, it felt like that trust and faith Hugo placed in him had been thrown back in his face. Meanwhile, Lycaon wanted to believe in Hugo, but his actions were full of doubt. He was always second-guessing, always questioning, and ultimately, his doubts led him to go behind Hugo's back, working with the Mayflower, the very elites they both opposed. This just proves how fundamentally different their approach to faith was. Hugo committed to his beliefs, even if it was reckless and painful. Lycaon struggled with his, constantly looking for reassurance but never truly giving it back. Not gonna lie, I feel like all this could be resolved if they had communicated effectively or gone to a couples therapy instead of playing this guessing game. But most importantly, the core message from this analysis proves that faith is not just belief or the absence of doubt, but the willingness to commit despite it. Hugo and Lycaon represent two opposing sides of belief, one who follows it to the bitter end and one who hesitates until it's too late. I'm not here to argue whose moral code is right or wrong, because we see how two polar beliefs can eventually clash, showing that life isn't just black and white. It's a reminder that sometimes, even when we're certain in our convictions, we fail to realize how our actions might stray from what we claim to believe. The distance between intention and reality is often greater than we realize. And whether it's gradual or in a single moment, we might change our actions or beliefs in ways we don't expect. Which brings us to look at their dynamic in the current timeline. In the past, Hugo proudly dismissed the need for faith, while Lycaon clung to the oath of not taking a human life. But the current story shows how both of them have shifted. It's a bit complex, so bear with me as we break it down. In the beginning, our first encounter with Hugo was rather interesting. He talked about a niche movie called Children of Devils.
It's about a man who unwillingly turned into a vampire and after years of plotting, finally kills his evil father and ultimately dies in the process.
The plot itself sounded very familiar to his own life story, but this line was very foreshadowing.
And ultimately dies in the process.
So, it's a tragic story.
I actually think the ending is pretty good. At least he accomplished his goal, and death was just the price he was willing to pay.
As if he was already plotting his own death from the beginning. Before we go any further, let's quickly recap what led us to this point. The team had ventured into a hollow to retrieve sacrifice, only to be ambushed by Hartman, the current head of the Ravenlock family, thanks to intel seemingly provided by Hugo. It appeared as though Hugo had betrayed them, but in reality, he was using the setup to expose Hartman. However, just as the truth came to light, Hugo made another shocking move, taking the sacrifice core for himself and announcing his decision to join TOPS, which is a choice that would put countless lives at risk. Now, this does not necessarily mean that everyone was in for this grand scheme. As he explicitly mentions,
You're just too gullible, Vivian. I also told you, everybody lies. To hide their true intentions, people lie so smoothly, they don't even bat an eye.
this raises the possibility that what seemed like the final act of his facade was actually just the beginning. While he did admit that he tricked the team thinking he betrayed them for Hartman, there was one more act he had to perform. However, this act required Hugo to place his faith in others, which is something he always tried to deny. Placing faith in Phaethon to protect Vivian relied on the team to stop the Ravenlock, and believed that Lycaon would ultimately stop him. Whether Hugo was truly dead or not, it felt like the act itself was the only way to show Lycaon the bitter truth of his ideals, that sometimes one life must be taken to save more innocent people, even if it's the life of someone was once dear to you.
But on the basis of not causing harm to other people's lives. That's also what Jack used to say. You remember, don't you?
Of course I remember. All right. I promise.
That sounded pretty forced. Don't forget, things don't end well for people who break their oaths.
I'm good for my word. You must trust your fellow companions. That's also something Jack would say.
And so, the one who still upheld the oath has finally broken it, while the one who dismissed faith has finally acknowledged it. But what now? It shouldn't be as simple as that, wouldn't it?
Judging from how we've interacted before, Hugo didn't seem like the reckless type. I feel like there's more to this than meets the eye.
And I agree, Wise, because I feel like there's another thing worth discussing that could lead this planned death isn't the end. There is a minor dialogue, which is so interesting if we recall how Hugo suddenly mentioned about the same film again.
Remember that revenge movie I told you about, Children of Devils? I still haven't found it, but I came across another videotape with the same name. Turns out, in that story, the children of devils are actually the children of gods. Sorry for rambling. Hope you don't mind.
I don't think this is just some ramble. It's a subtle yet powerful metaphor for Hugo's journey. Initially, he sought out the vengeance movie, Children of Devils, which suggests a character that is inherently wicked, much like how Hugo sees himself. But when he stumbles upon a different film with the same title and discovers the twist that these so-called devils are actually divine, it implies that what is considered evil might simply be misunderstood. Perhaps those condemned as devils were actually fighting for something righteous and noble. So this challenges the idea of good versus evil and raises questions about the role Hugo believes he's meant to play. Hugo was a victim of unfortunate circumstances, born unwanted, sold by his own mother, and raised in a family that saw him as nothing more than a tool. His dark past became the only lens through which others judged him, stripping away the innocence he never had a chance to keep. And if the world sees him as a villain, he comes to believe it was necessary to become one. So, what if his morally gray actions were actually forced upon him by a corrupt system that had already decided his fate? What he believes is righteous justice, such as sacrificing a life to save others, could actually just be another tragic repetition of a deeply flawed system.
I just want to take back what's mine. If fate is not willing to give me justice, then I'll just have to seize it with my own hands. Stealing, robbing, lying, or betraying. I'll do whatever it takes.
The ultimate tragedy of Hugo's story is that in the end, he deliberately creates his own condemnation. By trying to join tops and orchestrating events so that Lycaon would be forced to kill him, he ensures that the world will see him as the villain. This moment sort of parallels the central theme of To Kill a Mockingbird, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the destruction of something that was never truly evil to begin with. Just as the novel condemns the senseless killing of innocents, this chapter touches on that same theme multiple times. At the start, Proxy is wrongly accused of stealing someone's wallet, And the accuser, coming from a powerful family, is confident his privilege alone guarantees victory.
Is that why you jump to accuse others? Hoping to leverage your family name to make a quick Denny? I really hate it when innocent people are wrongfully accused.
This incident sets the stage for Hugo's tragic end, a powerful reflection of how society punishes those who exist outside its rigid moral structures. The irony is that Hugo himself believes in this system. He sees the world as cruel and unjust, yet instead of fighting to change it, he allows it to claim him, proving its cruelty in the process. And Lycaon's role is crucial here. As the mayor's trusted enforcer, he stands on the side of those in power, the ones who dictate justice and are perceived as righteous simply because they define the system. Though Hugo's actions force his hand, Lycaon ultimately plays into the very system they once sought to challenge. Hugo's death is not an act of justice, but an inevitability, one shaped by a world that has already decided who the villains and heroes are. This isn't just a straightforward revenge plot. It's about how narratives define people, often before they even have a chance to define themselves. Hugo's early life was nothing but suffering just because he was an illegitimate child. Throughout the story, Jack constantly suspected Hugo that his dark past might consume him and that he could easily walk down the path of evil.
I don't think being gifted is a good thing for him.
What do you mean?
He bears a dark and painful past. What he was taught, the hatred he was faced with, everything he picked up, it's all become an integral, inseparable part of him. It's a curse that flows through his lineage, a curse that fate branded him with. I've seen far too many people like that throughout this long life of mine.
Do you mean Hugo's going to be a bad guy?
But that perspective feels unfair and biased, doesn't it? Lycaon was even convinced by Jack's notion and saw Hugo's actions as nothing more than vengeance and hatred. But even so, if Hugo had truly been consumed by hatred and his past, he wouldn't be where he is after tainting his hands in blood the first time. He may justify his actions as necessary, but he also recognizes that they come at a cost, which might be a reason why he sees his own death as justice. A price he had to pay to prevent more bloodshed and to stop himself from becoming the very monster he fought against, and ultimately to preserve what remained of his humanity.
I beg you, please keep her safe.
Hang on. What's that supposed to mean?
Think of it as the last bit of conscience I have left. A kid as pure as her. She should stay alongside someone who walks in the light. Like you. Not even Vivian can agree with all my beliefs. One day we'll go our separate ways.
Despite everything, Hugo still cares and apologizes. He tries to shield Vivian from the moral compromises he has accepted. He doesn't want her to follow in his footsteps because he still believes that people like her, as well as Phaethon, are necessary in this world. All of this shows that his choices weren't born from blind hatred. They were a conscious, painful decision. And that distinction makes all the differences. In the end, Hugo's tragedy isn't that he became evil, but that he believed he had to be. And by doing so, he ensured that the world would remember him exactly as he feared, not as a misunderstood soul, but as a villain who had to be put down.
But this isn't some children's story of a dragon slayer becoming an evil dragon. Sometimes, to slay the dragon, you must first become one. With sharp claws, rending fangs, and strength enough to destroy anything. So I will bloody my hands. I will carry the weight of my sins. I will become the abyss.
But again, this was never just about Hugo and Lycaon. It was about the system and society that made them. Just like Vivian, who's seen as cursed because of her powers, or Phaethon, who's respected by many despite proxies operating in morally gray areas, which Hugo envied, thinking he was lucky. It's a world that forces people into roles, where justice and loyalty are privileges, and survival demands sacrifice. Hugo believed he had to become the villain to make a difference, and Lycaon believed holding on to his ideals would be enough. But in the face of a broken world, neither was truly right or wrong. Just two people trying to fight against a fate that had already been decided for them. This is mere speculation, but if you ask me, this is some crazy long con. Hugo's death marks the beginning of a larger, grandiose strategy, reminiscent of Mockingbird's core concept of blending into high society to serve their mission just like the old days. By playing along with the unjust system's game to hide suspicion, he's likely about to put people exactly where he wants them. And maybe, just maybe, he's forcing the Mayflower to finally act, pushing them out of their passive righteousness and into a position where they have no choice but to fight back.
You know about the power struggle between Tops and City Hall. Those elites at Tops would be only too happy to see the Exaltists plotting a grand attack on New Eridu using sacrifices.
That would severely harm the Mayflower's reputation and approval rating in New Eridu. And that's exactly what Tops wants to see.
After all, if even Lycaon was driven to kill, how much longer can they afford to stay defensive and hiding behind their moral high ground? And with that, this does hint that he is unlikely gone for good, and we're about to unravel something deeper about his actions in the future. I know that's kind of a lot to take in, but again, it's a yap session of how I truly loved this latest chapter. There are so many other things I wanted to talk about, like Hugo's take on sacrifice and his view on Mockingbird, but alas, I need to take a shit. We'll save it for another day, but let me know in the comments if you're interested in his character deep dive. I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you next time.